So it's 5 years today since my near-death experience. And I thought, let's have a look at 10 things that researchers say happen to people after their near-death experience. And I'll share with you my perspective on those 10 things. So if you're interested in near-death experiences, in spirituality, consciousness, human growth, please feel free to click subscribe, hit the bell so that you get notifications. And it does help if you comment, it does help if you like, and I love building communities. Yeah, what an amazing life we have the opportunity to live. Number one on my list is that researchers say people who have had a near-death experience have a deeper connection to nature. That's very true for me. What I find is that I love being in nature. It's like my connection to nature has expanded so much, and I feel like plants and trees are beings. I feel like they have this conscious spirit in them. And if I'm walking through a forest or the bush that we call in Australia, I feel like plants are leaning over and sending me love and guiding me. As far as animals go, I have this deep, deep wonder of animals and a love. So like patting a dog now, it's like I've always loved dogs, but patting a dog now, it's like this exchange of love that happens. I love swimming and being in water, cold waterfalls, cold lakes. You might have seen some of my videos, for example, the I'm Moving On video, which is a song of mine where I'm in Tasmania and amazing nature places. I find that I love the sounds of nature. So I don't know if it's coming through here, but there's birds and the sound of the water around me. I'm a lot more aware of those things. And I find that since my near-death experience, it's not always the case, but I can be less in here and more here. And I love it. I love that change. I feel like my connection to nature brings so much joy to my life, and I realize that I'm not separate from nature. I am nature. And yeah, as a result, I'm a lot more protective of nature. I feel that nature is something that is essential for humanity. And there's so many medicines that come from nature. So many pharmaceutical products have been synthesized from what they've discovered about animals and plants. And that's something else that I really have found, that I love learning about nature and what we can do with nature. Number two on my list of what people go through after near-death experience is that they spend more time alone. And for some people, they can be perceived as being antisocial because they spend so much more time alone than what they did before their near-death experience. And I have to say, that archetype of the wanderer, the one that goes away from their community to explore and to be on their own and discover more deeply into themselves, that archetype for me is definitely stronger. And I think it was always there, but I didn't allow myself to go into that experience of exploring on my own. And if I think back to one of the best holidays that I had pre-near-death experience, was when I was around 28 years old, and I went to Western Samoa in the middle of the Pacific, and I spent 3 weeks there on my own. And I love holidaying on my own, but I certainly wasn't doing that before my near-death experience. So I definitely spend more time alone. Sometimes I find it overwhelming in groups, and I can be in a group and I love the connections with people, but I find that I'll go out and, I love sitting somewhere like this by the water and just listening to stillness, or connecting with guides, and having that connection to myself it's become paramount, and I've found that having time alone is important in that. Number 3 on my list is material possessions. And what I find now is the possessions I have are so I can create. Like, I love creating. I love creating videos. I love creating music and creating experiences for myself and experiences for others, and helping other people create their lives. And the material possessions I have help me to do that. So my laptop, my camera, my musical instruments, even my clothes are like adventure, and I treasure those. But as far as, you know, like lounges and homewares and, you know, my material possessions are purposeful. So even my car is purposeful. It's a hybrid car that hardly uses any petrol, so that I can have more freedom and an adventure. As far as wanting to own a home, I really would love to own a home and have it as my sanctuary in nature that I come home to. So I go out and adventure and come home. But as far as like owning a home for the sake of owning a home, or owning a home because culturally that's how we've been trained, that's not what appeals to me. I would like to own my own home so I can create with it, but also go there to replenish myself. If you have any questions about material possessions, please pop them in the comments, because I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'd love to answer them. Number 4 is that many people change their careers after a near-death experience. And that's certainly the case for me. So up until 2 years ago, I was a school teacher, and I had times when I loved the work, and I had times where I wanted to make a change. And 2 years ago, I took the leap. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's time for change. And so my career now is living life as a creator. So I coach people to help create what they want to create. I write, record, share, perform music. I edit videos. I help people with their social media, and I explore. And my career is being myself. And, you know, as I was saying about my material possessions, they're connected to my purpose. And the separation between my work and who I am, it's like this fuzzy little, almost invisible line. Whereas before I had my work, and then I had the things that I did outside of work. My overall fulfillment has skyrocketed. And there were definitely times that was a hard change to make. And the fear that I had around that change, like, that was like palpable. It was like this invisible wall of hard fear that took me years to go through. And pre-near-death experience, I was oblivious that I could do that. Like, pre-near-death experience, I wasn't really living an inspired life the way that I am now. And that message that I got in my near-death experience, which was do the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart, that changed everything. And the work was be myself, share myself. And that's one of the reasons I create these videos, is that the gift of my experience isn't just for me. The gift of my experience is for others. And the walking the planet from my heart is me honoring what my heart calls me to do, and trusting that what my heart is calling me to do is right for myself, right for others, right for humanity. And yeah, that's a really big change from before. The 5th thing on our list is toxic relationships. And the researchers say that people that have had a near-death experience get rid of toxic relationships in their life. And I would definitely say that that's been something that's happened for me. And, you know, one of the things that happened was the intimate relationship that I was in 2 weeks after I got out of hospital. it fell apart. Like, it's self-destructed. Prior to my NDE, the relationship had been really struggling. And even though we cared about each other, it was just really hard for both of us, for the kids. My perspective is that an NDE will either bring a relationship closer or cause it to fall apart. My perspective is that a medical emergency like that, something that's, life or death, will either bring a relationship closer or it'll help it to fall apart. And so that's what happened for me, is that the relationship fell apart. My relationship I have with my current wife, who I plan to be with for a long, long time, is beautiful. Like, there's communication and love and there's understanding, but there's also freedom. And I think it's a love that I've never experienced before. And wow, I'm so glad that I'm alive to experience this relationship. And I love my wife dearly, and wow, I'm so happy that I have a second opportunity at life to experience a love like what I have now. As far as toxic relationships, I don't believe I have any people in my life where my relationship is toxic. Sometimes I have a toxic relationship to social media and finding out what's happening in the world. Sometimes, I can have a toxic relationship with myself and how I try and control things rather than just surrendering and letting things go. But as far as toxic relationships, I think post-NDE, it is something that I've been naturally getting rid of in my life. Sixth on the list, mediumship. And researchers say that people that have an NDE are more likely to experiencing some sort of spiritual connection to guidance. And I very much feel that my connection to guidance from the spiritual realm or from whatever place you want to call that is much deeper than it used to be. So pre-NDE, I would have occasional moments where there'd be some bomb of guidance would come, or I'd been a Reiki practitioner and I found that I could communicate with people's higher selves and they would tell me things, and then I would communicate that with permission to the client. And I feel like that's been enhanced, and I really want to explore mediumship and channeling and things like that. And I've been listening to some channeled messages from people, like watching them on YouTube, Spotify, and I'm really, really into it. And I can't wait to find out more. And even today I was at a cafe and the man I was talking to, he said, I think you'd be really into channeling. And I was like, actually, I'm really into that right now. And it's interesting that synchronicity seems to happen. And I seem to be a lot more aware of synchronicity. If I'm in my shit, I'm not very aware of synchronicity. And, it feels horrible, but I definitely feel a lot more grounded. So if you go to the link in the description, I have a resource there, which is my system for having a clear mind so I can connect to guidance. And you're welcome to have that for free. So head over to the link in the description and you can download that. Number 7 is that researchers say people that have an NDE no longer fear death. And for me, I know there's something on the other side. Like, I've experienced that. I've experienced a being without a body, and that I had conscious awareness even though I was blacked out. I believe, or actually before I used to believe that there'd be something after death, whereas now I know that I am a being. I'm not just this body, and that when I die I'll go in the ground and maggots will eat me and I'll no longer exist. Now I know that I'll transcend somewhere, and I have less fear about death. But there's this duality where I think I'm more attached to living than I was before. Funny enough, like I'm loving life so much and loving the people, the experiences, and I'm loving the beauty of nature and what this planet can offer, and the beauty of having a body and the experiences, like even the touch on my arm and rubbing my hands together. I love that. And there's part of me that's really attached to that and doesn't want to give it up. There's another part of me that is consciously aware that when I'm dying, I'll let go. Last time I was like, I want to stay, and I was given a contract for staying. But I feel like the next time I die, I'll be like, okay, I surrender, I'm coming with you. The hardest part about dying was I was leaving my body without anybody I loved being in the room. Like I had a medical team trying to keep me alive, but nobody I loved was there. And yeah, I think that was the most traumatic part of my whole near-death experience, other than coming back and having like the most ridiculous pain, level 11 torturous pain from my body filled with my own blood and pressing on my organs. And then, you know, the pain of relationship breakup, the pain of my body, you know, massive blood clot and being unable to walk properly, and having to claw my way back into living a life that I loved. Yeah, that trauma of nobody I loved was in the room was very difficult for me to... There was a lot of grief about having nobody I loved in the room. So the next time I die, I want to be surrounded by love. And if I'm not surrounded by love, I want to be love. I want to let go, and I want to be love as I leave my body. So I'm glad I've had a practice run. In summary, I fear death less, but I think I'm more attached to life because I love it so much. That's right. Number 8 on the list is purpose, and that people who have had a near-death experience are more connected to living a purposeful life. And I was really blessed in my near-death experience that I was given a contract. And the contract was to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. And in the work that I do, just as I was expressing that in my conscious awareness, I had this download that the work that I do is be myself, share myself. And I had visions of me sitting with people, connecting with people, listening to people as myself. I didn't have to do other things. So now I have this contract: be myself, share myself, walk the planet from my heart. That's life-changing for me. And when I go off track, I come back to that contract. For me, I died because I wasn't living from my heart. I thought I was, but I wasn't living from my heart as I truly was meant to be. So life is more purposeful now. I create, I have fun, I play music, I coach, I share with people, I connect with people deeply as much as I possibly can. And that's my purpose. And you know, I still have human things that I want to achieve. Like I'd love to own a home out in nature, and you know, one of my dreams is to own a van, and in the van I have a kitchen and a bed, and that it's beautiful, and that I also have a studio space where I can create videos and footage and do my work, do my creativity whilst living on the road. And you know, I want to travel the world and connect to people and places deeply, and I want to play music for people. And I want loved ones to be a part of that. And I also want to come home to loved ones. I think there's a lot more clarity in my purpose post having my NDE. Whereas before my NDE, I think I was just doing whatever I could to get through life. And I didn't realize how hard my life was, and that I was actually miserable compared to how I feel now. If I had have died when I was having my NDE, I wouldn't have experienced what I've experienced in the last 5 years, and I'm so grateful for that. All right, we're getting close to the end. Number 9, letting go of resentment and past hurts. Researchers say that people that have had an NDE are better at that. I think I am, but far out, that's something that it's been the hardest thing to learn, is to let go of past hurts. And even to be aware that I have past hurts. You know, like that conscious awareness of what is happening in my life that is connected to the past. You know, if I go into some story, so for example, let's say an event happens and it triggers something, I can either observe the emotion and the emotion passes, or that trigger can happen and the emotion sticks. If the emotion sticks, I'm in story. And when I say I'm in story, I mean I've gone into a story from the past. There's some sort of healing for me to go through so that I can become freer again. And by freer, I mean expansive, being joyful, giving the gift of myself. And it's not this falsified, don't worry, be happy. It's, I've processed pain, suffering from the past, and now I feel freer. Things still hurt, right? I still experience pain and suffering like any human does. And if you saw my video prior to this one, I was in a lot of pain and suffering. Things still hurt. However, I've learned skills to be able to process emotions much more quickly, to see stories from the past more quickly. And I encourage you to do that. In the description below, I'll put a link to something called the Path of Love. And for me, doing the Path of Love, which is a retreat, was an amazing experience. They do it in over 20 countries. And I learned so much about myself, vulnerability, connecting to others. And if you feel pulled to do work like that, so that you can become free of the past, I highly recommend the Path of Love. Number 10 on my list is spirituality. And researchers say that people who have had an NDE have a greater connection to the spiritual. That is true. You know, it's cliche, but I believe that I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience. And I also believe that everybody else on the planet is having a physical experience as a spiritual being. I feel like I'm more connected to spiritual aspects of our lives and our universe than I've ever been before. And you know, it's somewhat controversial, but plant medicines have played a role in that. And when I say plant medicines, there's things like psychedelics related to mushrooms or plants. So for example, ayahuasca. And through those medicines, I've been able to connect more deeply to guidance from somewhere else other than myself. I know that plant medicines aren't for everybody. And I've been exploring consciousness because I experienced expansion even when I had blacked out. And I have this real curiosity now, like, oh, what is consciousness? What does that mean? How can I learn more about it? My current understanding of spirituality is that we have reasons that we are here in this body. And we have reasons that we love connecting to each other. We have reasons that we love nature. We have reasons that we exist after we die. And I don't have many answers at all, but I love exploring consciousness. And I love curiosity, oh, what's going to happen next? And sometimes my human self is like, I just want to know what is happening next because this is crazy. I can't cope with this. And then other times it's like, what is going to happen? And when I'm curious, life is easier. When I'm being pessimistic or doubting the perfection of what's happening, my life is much more difficult. So that's number 10, spirituality. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Please subscribe, ring the bell so that you can find out when I have another video that I release. And in the meantime, I hope that you're having a beautiful experience. And if you're not, I trust that that's the experience you're having so that you can expand, so that you can be who you want to be, so that you can access your heart and follow your heart. It's an honor to share with you. Thank you if you've made it this far, and I look forward to seeing you again.